Hello and welcome to BYJU'S. This is a continuation of geography this week. Now, because of much of the political considerations or the developments which have been taking place throughout the world, and as the population which is increasing is creating a tremendous pressure on the resources. So because of the political developments and the pressure on the resources, we find that some of the places are gaining more significance. The reason is their strategical position. So because of all these parameters are responsible to identify that region as something which we call it as a geopolitical consideration. So these geopolitical considerations or geopolitics can be used in defining the international relations, which can be used to elaborate your mains answer sheets. And again, in case of prelims, the map work questions can be helpful in defining the locations. Now with this, we start the today's topic, that is the Corsica Island. This Corsica Island is in the Mediterranean Sea, and this is in the news because of the oil spill. And the oil spill was the reason of the collision between the two vessels, and these two vessels which collided near the Corsica Island was responsible for spilling up of the oil. And the two countries made tremendous effort towards the cleaning up of the spilled oil. One is the France and second one is Italy. Now, before understanding this Corsica Island, we'll make an effort to understand the geography of that region, which can be significant in answering the prelims questions also. Now, when you talk about the Mediterranean Sea, there may be questions on the countries which borders the Mediterranean Sea. Once it has been asked also. When you talk about the countries, Libya, Egypt, Turkey, Italy, France, Spain, Morocco, Algeria, Tunis. So these are the countries which are surrounding the Mediterranean Sea. Now, along with these countries, we have something called as a strait. Now, what is the strait and how do we define the strait in case of geography? Strait is nothing but it is a narrow channel of water body which connects two huge water bodies. And in case of the Mediterranean Sea, we come across few straits which are very significant. The first one is the Strait of Bosphorus. Now, in this region, we find the Strait of Bosphorus. Now, the Strait of Bosphorus connects the Black Sea to the Sea of Marmara, and again from Sea of Marmara to Aegean Sea. Then again from Aegean Sea, it is having a linkage to what we call it as the Mediterranean Sea. And we have the strait called as Strait of Gibraltar. The Strait of Gibraltar connects the Mediterranean Sea with the Atlantic Ocean. Then we have something called as the Suez Canal. The Suez Canal is a man-made canal, and the Suez Canal connects Red Sea with the Mediterranean Sea. So these are some of the significant straits and canals which are seen in case of the Mediterranean Sea. Along with that, there is a sea called as Black Sea, which is in the northeastern side of the Mediterranean Sea. Now, this Black Sea is very, very significant because of involvement of Russia and the other geopolitical considerations in that region. So you should remember about the countries surrounding the Black Sea, and it is a strategical location with reference to the recent developments also. Now, in case of the Mediterranean Sea, we find the Corsica Island, which is a territory or island of the France. Below the Corsica Island, we find the Sardinia Island, and the Sardinia Island is a territory of Italy. So we find these two islands are having two different authorities. Now, when we talk about the France, again, as one important point about the France is, when you talk about the international standard times or time zones, when we say, France, even though it is having a geographically smaller area compared to large countries, but its territories are spread overseas. That means that its islands are spread in different parts of the ocean, in Atlantic Ocean, Pacific Ocean, and Indian Ocean also. So because of that, we find France is a country which has the more number or highest numbers or the largest numbers of the time zones, which is around 12. And this is followed by USA and Russia, which are having 11 time zones. Corsica Island in the Mediterranean Sea and the Sardinia Island both are connected by a strait, which we call it as the Strait of Bonifacio. Now, the Strait of Bonifacio divides the Tyrrhenian Sea from the Western Mediterranean Sea, and this strait is used for navigation in case of international vessels. And this Strait of Bonifacio is very, very significant for the reasons that is ecological significance, and it is also having very significant in case of socio-economic development. And along with that, it is also very significant in case of scientific approach. So due to the three consideration, International Union of Conservation of Nature has demarcated it as an international strait. Now, as it is having significance in ecological parameters, socio-economic parameters, and scientifically it is very significant for research, the two countries, more specifically France and Italy, made an effort to protect this Strait of Bonifacio. And these two countries, France and Italy, they approached the International Maritime Organization to make an effort towards the protecting this significant Strait of Bonifacio. And this International Maritime Organization has given the status of PSSA, that is particularly sensitive sea area, to this Strait of Bonifacio. Now, the reason behind providing the status of PSSA, that is particularly sensitive sea area, is to protect its ecological parameters, to maintain the sustainability of socio-economic impact, and also the research and developments which have been done in that region. And this is an area where maximum number of maritime traffics are seen, so it is most vulnerable for the maritime pollution. So that's why it is taken as a consideration to protect under PSSA. Now, to protect this more significantly, this International Maritime Organization has provided a status of right to unimpeded transit passage within the premises of what we call it as United Nations Convention of Law of Sea. Simply, it is also referred as Law of Sea. So within this UNCLOS, it is having a status of the transit passage. Now, you should not confuse the transit passage with something called as an innocent passage also. So in case of much developments, we find innocent passage is also there and the transit passage is also there. Now, the innocent passage is a passage which is found within the territorial sea limit, and the main difference between the transit passage and the innocent passage is, in case of the transit passage, the submarine which is traveling through the strait, it can navigate below the surface, and it is also concerned with air transports. But in other hand, when you talk about the innocent passage is something where the submarine has to reach to the surface and it should show the flag, and along with that, this innocent passage is not concerned with air traffic. So these are the two differences between the innocent passage and the transit passage. And in case of Strait of Bonifacio, it is having the transit passage status of UNCLOS, United Nations Convention of Law of Sea. The second topic is the Golan Height, which is in the Middle East region. Now this Middle East region is dominated by Islamic cultural realm, and British referred this as a Middle East, that is modern Middle East, and Germans referred this region as an Oriental culture. So Oriental culture is also the same, and the Middle East of British is also the same. So the countries which forms the Middle East are part of African countries and part of the Asian countries, that is Turkey, Syria, Iraq, Iran, then again Israel, Libya, Algeria, and these some countries which are part of the Middle East. Now in case of Middle East or this geographical region, here also we find the straits which are very significant in case of prelims and also the geopolitical parameters. The first is in between the Iran and Oman, we find the strait, and this strait is called as Strait of Hormuz. It is very significant because it connects this water body, that is the Arabian Gulf or the Persian Gulf, with the Indian Ocean, and it is the strait which is very busy in carrying the vessels of oil, natural gases from the Middle East towards the other countries. And the second significant strait is in this part, which is referred as the Bab el Mandab. So these are the two important straits within the Middle East. One is the Hormuz Strait, second one is the Bab el Mandab Strait. Now this Bab el Mandab is very significant because it connects the Red Sea to Gulf of Aden, and from here it connects to the Indian Ocean. This Golan Height is a basaltic plateau, and this Golan Height is in the news. Now when we talk about this Golan Height, some history is also associated with that. Prior to 1967, this basaltic plateau, which we call it as Golan Height, was a part of Syria, and in the war which we refer it as Six-Day War in the year 1967, Egypt, Jordan, Syria and Israel were part of that war. So in this war, this region, the Golan Height, was lost by Syria and it was occupied by Israel. And in the year 1981, Israel took the control of the Golan Heights, in spite of many countries of the world have not recognized this as a part of the Israel. So in spite of the opposition from the world, we find the Israel is occupying the Golan Heights. Now the two factors are responsible for the occupation of the Golan Heights by Israel. One is it wants to expand its border. It's a geopolitical part. The second one is it wanted to create it as a buffer zone against the Syria. So for these two considerations, it has taken the occupation of the Golan Height. Now when we talk about the Golan Height, as it is a plateau which is having high altitude, it is very significant for Israel to maintain as an observation points to see or to check the developments in Syria and in the neighboring countries. So that's why it is very significant in case of Israel. Now when we talk about the Golan Heights, on the west side of Golan Heights, we find a river called as Jordan. So this Jordan River, it lies in that structural depression of the plateau, structural depression, and this Jordan River is the lowest elevation of any river in the world. And again in the western side, we have something called as Sea of Galilee. And the Sea of Galilee is also very significant because it is the source of fresh water for Israel. And the Sea of Galilee is also called as the Lake of Tiberias. So when we are referring to Sea of Galilee, it is also referred as the Lake of Tiberias, and it is the only source of water for the Israel. And in the eastern side, a part of this Golan Height where we find peacekeeping forces of United Nations is deployed in this region, and this is referred as UNDF, United Nations Disengagement Observer Forces. So this United Nations Disengagement Observer Forces is responsible to maintain the ceasefire between the Israel and the Syria. That is to maintain or to protect the peace. This UNDOF is operating in this part. Now, this Golan Height is in news recently because of the Israel Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. He has urged US to consider this Golan Height as an occupied territory or a part of the Israel. Okay, within that region, again we have something which we call it as the state of Palestine and the Jerusalem. Now these two are also very significant in case of geographical parameters here. Now the state of Palestine, it includes the Gaza Strip and the West Bank. So these two are the part of the Palestine. And in case of this Palestine, 137 countries which are members of United Nations have accepted the Palestine as a sovereign state, and the last one to accept or to give the sovereign state for this was Colombia. Again, it was in the month of August 2018. So the 137th country to accept the Palestine as a sovereign state was Colombia. Now, because of its position and because of its perspectives, it has achieved the status of observer in case of United Nations, and it is now referred as the sovereign state by around 137 countries. Now, with reference to Jerusalem, this Jerusalem is a city in West Bank. Now this is again in the news because of Israel as well as Palestine claiming or proclaiming it as their capital. In the year 2017, President of USA, Donald Trump, he made an attempt to recognize this Jerusalem as a capital of Israel. But this aspect of Donald Trump was opposed, and it was backed up by support of around 128 countries who opposed the Donald Trump's view of providing or recognizing the capital of Israel as Jerusalem. Now the third topic is a tropical cyclone TITLI, which was in the news. Now what is this cyclone? Cyclones are nothing but they are the low pressure wind systems, and in this low pressure wind systems the wind acquires the rotation speed, that is the circular motion. Such type of winds which acquires the circular motion due to atmospheric disturbances and along with other parameters like the Coriolis force is referred as the cyclones. And these cyclones can be classified in different parameters on the basis of their position, on the basis of modes of formation, that is how the cyclone is formed, whether it is due to temperature, that is thermal impact, or whether it is due to the air masses. Again, on the basis of its orientation or the path traced, the cyclones can be classified into two categories. One, all the low pressure systems which are found within the two tropics, that is Tropic of Cancer and Tropic of Capricorn, is referred as the tropical cyclones. And all the low pressure systems which acquires the circular motion, which are beyond the Tropic of Cancer and the Tropic of Capricorn, are referred as the extratropical cyclones, or as it is a region of less temperature than the tropics, it is also referred as temperate region, and the cyclones formed in this regions are also referred as the temperate cyclones. Now, as India is affected by both tropical cyclones and the temperate cyclones, as this TITLI cyclone is in the news, which is tropical cyclone, will confine to the tropical cyclones only. Now, the ideal conditions for the formation of the tropical cyclone are: one is the temperature. The temperature around 27 degrees centigrade is sufficient to create the temperature variations, which is responsible for creating atmospheric disturbances, where we find the wind acquires the rotational motion. And here again, the shearing of wind, that is the breaking up of wind, should be less, that is low wind shear should be there. Third, it should consist of abundant moisture, that is relative humidity should be high, and this moisture is nothing but a hidden energy, which we call it as the latent heat or energy, which is responsible for creating the storms also, and the moisture is responsible for creating best qualities of the clouds, more specifically the cumulonimbus clouds, which are always accompanied with thunderstorms and the lightnings with heavy downpours. So temperature, less or low wind shear, moisture, which includes latent heat, plus relative humidity, which is a quality of relative humidity which can create a huge amount of clouds. Along with that, a Coriolis force is also responsible for making the wind to deflect from the center. So when it deflects, it acquires the rotational speeds. So because of this, we don't find any cyclones exactly on the equator. We find the tropical cyclones near the equator, more specifically 5 degrees in the north and south to the 28 degrees. So as the Coriolis force impact is zero at the equator, no deflection of the wind is seen. So that's why we don't find the formation of the cyclones exactly at the equator. But near the equator, we can find the cyclones formation takes place. Now, these tropical cyclones, they are due to the temperature parameters. So that's why they are referred as thermal in origin. And these tropical cyclones, they acquire anti-clockwise in the northern hemisphere, and they acquire clockwise direction in the case of southern hemisphere. It means that the wind rotates in the anti-clockwise in the northern hemisphere, and it rotates in the clockwise in case of the southern hemisphere. Now, regarding the path traced or the orientation of this tropical cyclones, they always found in the trade wind belts. Initially, they travel along with the equator from east towards the west with trade winds. After that, due to impact of Coriolis force, they deflect towards northern side. Then again, due to Coriolis impact, they deflect in somewhere in the northeastern side. So it means that the path traced by the tropical cyclone is referred as parabolic. The path traced is parabolic. And in case of the moistures, we find the moisture is significant in case of water bodies. So the tropical cyclones are found in the oceans or the water bodies in the tropical areas, and more specifically in the western margins of the oceans, because the western margins of ocean is comparatively warmer than the eastern part. So we can say that the tropical cyclones originates in the western sides of the oceans in the tropics or within the Tropic of Cancer and Tropic of Capricorn, and they follow the parabolic path along with the direction of wind, that is the rotation of the wind is in the direction of anti-clockwise in the northern hemisphere and clockwise in case of the southern hemisphere. Now the structure of the tropical cyclone. The tropical cyclone consists of an eye. This eye is clear from clouds, so it means that no precipitation can be expected in the center of an cyclone. And surrounding the eye, the region is called as an eye wall. So with this eye wall, there we find the feeder bands. These feeder bands, they supply the moisture to the cyclone, and this moisture which is supplied is something which provides the energy and intensity to the cyclones. And as it is thermal in origin, the tropical cyclone is compact and the pressure gradient is very high. So due to high pressure gradient, it is intensive. That's why it is most destructive, as the wind velocities are very high. And the moisture content also provides a quality of clouds which can form the cumulonimbus clouds, and these cumulonimbus clouds always are associated with the thunderstorms and the lightnings. So here in the eye wall region, we find the formation of the cumulonimbus clouds, and these cumulonimbus clouds provides heavy downpour. So in these regions we find heavy downpour. And on the upper areas, above areas, we find the cirrus clouds are there. And these cirrus clouds are the clouds which are found at higher altitudes. And always remember that the center of a cyclone, which is called as an eye, is always clear from clouds. So here we don't find any precipitation. The reason is part of a wind descends down in this area. This descending wind is responsible for making that area completely clear from the formation of the clouds. So because of that, at the center of an cyclone, that is tropical cyclones, we don't find the precipitation. But at the edges, we find the precipitation is comparatively very high, which is accompanied by thunderstorms, lightnings, and heavy downpours. And always remember that here we find the cumulonimbus clouds, and on the upper areas, that is at the higher altitude, we find the cirrus clouds. So we can say the structure of tropical cyclone consists of an eye, which is clear from the clouds, no precipitation. Adjacent areas are referred as an eye wall, which consists of rain band, the feeder bands, which pull the moisture, or the moistures are supplied to the cyclone by these two feeder bands and the rain bands, which keeps on increasing the intensity of the cyclones. And as the moisture is maximum in the ocean, the intensity of cyclone is also maximum in case of the oceans. These tropical cyclones are named regionally in different parts of the world. They are named as typhoons in case of Western Pacific Ocean. They are named as cyclones in case of Indian Ocean. And again, they are named as hurricanes in case of the Atlantic Ocean and a part of the Pacific Oceans also. So these are the low pressure wind systems only, but with different names, that is the regional names. When we talk about the cyclone TITLI, before that also we had the names called as the Varda cyclone, we had Oki cyclone, we had the Sagar cyclone, we have the Mekun cyclone. We find many cyclones were there which were having a particular names. Now how these tropical cyclones are named and why they are named. So the naming up of tropical cyclone is done for two reasons. One is to make ease of communication between the forecaster and the general public. That is the first reason, ease of communication between the forecaster and the general public. And the second important thing regarding the naming up of the tropical cyclone is these tropical cyclones, they have an average lifespan of 3 to 10 days. In some cases they exceed that, but in general 3 to 10 days is a life of the tropical cyclone. And within a single basin we find it is struck by one cyclone or more than one cyclones. So to avoid the confusion between the cyclones which strike the basins, it is better to name the cyclones. So that's why the naming up of cyclone is done. One, the ease of communication between the forecaster and the general public. Second one is to avoid the confusion between the cyclones which strike the same region, as the lifespan of the tropical cyclone is in general 3 to 10 days. Now, how these cyclones are named? In different parts of the world, when we talk about Pacific Ocean or Atlantic Ocean, the basin countries are responsible for framing the names. But in case of India, more specifically, the North Indian Ocean, where we find Bay of Bengal and Arabian Sea is found on the adjacent areas of India. So that region is referred as the North Indian Ocean. So in this North Indian Ocean, the naming up of the tropical cyclone was started from 2004. And 8 countries in the basin, they are the Bangladesh, India, Maldives, Myanmar, Oman, Pakistan, Sri Lanka, and Thailand. So these 8 countries contributed for naming of the cyclones. Every country provided 8 names. The names provided by India are Agni, Akash, Bijli, Jal, Lehar, Megh, Sagar, and Vayu. So every country of the basin provides the 8 names. So 8 countries, 8 names, totally 64 names are there. But the naming up of the cyclone is done on the basis of the countries which are arranged in the alphabetical order, not the names. So the countries which are arranged on the alphabetical orders, they will get the chance, or the names of those proposed countries will be given to that particular cyclone, and it is succeeded by the next country which follows in that alphabetical order. For example, in case of 2017, we find Wardha was there. The name was given by Pakistan. Then again, we find Asari. The name was given by Sri Lanka. Then Mora, which was given by Thailand. Then Oki, the name was given by Bangladesh. Then Sagar, the name was given by India. Mekhanu, the name was given by Maldives. Dai, again Myanmar. Luban. Now, the Titli name is given by Pakistan. So it means that the naming up of the cyclone moves in the alphabetical orders presented by the countries, not the names suggested. So countries are arranged on the basis of alphabetical orders, and the proposed names comes in the cycles. So 2016, we find the naming is done in this way. Then again, 2017, we find the namings are done. Then in the year 2018 also, we find the namings are done on the basis of the countries which are arranged in the alphabetical order. So this Titli, which hit the Indian coast, was named by Pakistan. And this Titli is referred as a severe cyclone in case of the cyclone parameters. Now, the Indian Meteorological Department classifies these low pressure circulating wind systems on the basis of the wind achieving the velocities. Now, if the wind velocity is 31 to 50 kilometers per hour, it is referred as a depression. If it is 51 to 62 kilometers per hour, it is referred as a deep depression. And if it achieves 63 to 88 kilometers per hour, then that wind is referred as a cyclonic storm. And if it achieves 89 to 117 kilometers per hour, it is referred as severe cyclonic storm. And in case if the wind achieves 118 to 165 kilometers per hour, it is referred as very severe cyclonic storms. And in case of the Titli, which has achieved the wind speed more than 118 kilometers per hour, is categorized as the very severe cyclone storm in Indian Meteorological Department. And if the wind velocity is more than 221 kilometers per hour, then it is referred as the super cyclone storms, which was seen in case of Odisha, which hit the Odisha coast in the year 2004 and again in the year 1998 also. Now, the cyclone prone areas in India. Now, when we talk about the Indian coastal areas, according to National Disaster Management Authority, Out of total 7,516 kilometers of the total coastline of India, 5,700 kilometers of coastline is vulnerable for cyclone and tsunami. So it means that if we take this as an equator, and when we say the cyclones which are formed near the equator, so after forming the cyclones or the tropical cyclones, the path traced by the cyclones is in the form of parabola. So because of that, if the cyclones are formed here, they try to move towards India in the form of parabolic parameters. So if you talk about the regions which are vulnerable for the tropical cyclones are the regional areas. This is the Coromandel coast. This is northern Sircar. And here we find the Utkal coast. Now, the maximum number of cyclones will hit the northern Sircar, that is the Andhra and the neighboring areas. So maximum number of cyclones will hit the northern Sircar. And the most intensive and very severe cyclones will hit the Utkal coast. So that's why if a cyclone hits the Odisha coast, it means that it is very severe cyclone and very intensive cyclones. It means the strength of the cyclone is comparatively very, very high. So when we talk about the cyclone prone areas in India, northern Sircar coast, Utkal coast are vulnerable for the cyclones, and among these Utkal coast is vulnerable for severe cyclones, or sometimes we call it as the super cyclones also. When the cyclone enters into the land, we call it as landfall of a cyclone. And in case of this TITLI cyclone, it made a landfall on October 11th in a region called as Odisha and adjacent to Andhra Pradesh. So because of this region received heavy rainfall, and as it is very severe cyclonic storms, the impact is also very strong in that, which created more amount of loss of property and the lives also. And apart from this, when the cyclone makes a landfall, then it tries to move away along with its path. It depends on the moisture which is there, or it depends on the energy which is there in the cyclone which is carried, which is significant to provide how long it can sustain. When the cyclone is there in the ocean or on the surface of ocean, it continuously absorbs the moisture which maintains the intensity of the cyclone. The moment when it makes the landfall, the moisture availability decreases. So it means that its intensity decreases. It tries to ceases to exist. Sometimes the cyclones crosses the land part of India, as it is narrow in case of southern. Then again, after crossing that, it reaches to the Arabian Sea. And once it reaches to the Arabian Sea, chances are there that it may re-intensify. So in this case, when it becomes re-intensify, again, there are chances that it may strike the Maharashtra region and the Gujarat region. So we can say that the Gujarat region, the Maharashtra region, this whole stretch, including northern Sircar and the Utkal coast, are the cyclone prone areas in case of India. Now, the Asia Pacific region, which includes this part, is always seen as most vulnerable for the cyclones and the other disasters. So here we find the number of cyclones, that is the tropical cyclones, are very high. As in case of Japan also, we find the typhoon Ziba was there. Then again, in case of India, we find the TITLI. So why this region is most vulnerable for the cyclones? The two reasons are, one is this part is the western part of the Pacific Ocean, and Pacific Ocean is the largest ocean, which makes around 50% of the total volume of water. So as the western part of the Pacific Ocean is comparatively warmer, so we find the number of tropical cyclones will be more in the Pacific Ocean because of high temperature in that region. It is the result of the trade winds which accumulate the temperature in this region, or which accumulate the warm water in this region. So we find more number of cyclones are there in case of western part of the Pacific. These cyclones, after developing, they passes through the Strait of Malacca, or they make a landfall in this region. After making a landfall, they enter into the adjacent areas, which is referred as Bay of Bengal. And when they enter into Bay of Bengal, again they re-intensify. So when they re-intensify, it means that cyclones again restarts in that region. The wind pressure starts in that region. The rotation of the wind starts in that region. So it means that chances of the cyclones crossing the Pacific Ocean and entering into the Indian Ocean, more specifically Bay of Bengal, is seen. So that's why in case of Bay of Bengal, these cyclones are referred as ex situ cyclones. Now, this is one region. Second is when we take the temperature of these two. One is the Bay of Bengal and second one is the Arabian Sea. The temperature of Bay of Bengal is comparatively very high than the Arabian Sea. It means that at least we find 2 degrees centigrade temperature is more in case of Bay of Bengal. Now the reason for more temperature of Bay of Bengal is, one is more number of fresh rivers or fresh water enters into Bay of Bengal. So because of that, here we find high stratification. So when there is high stratification, it means that the layers of fresh waters and the salt waters are more. So mixing up of water is comparatively less. So it maintains the temperature of that region or the surface comparatively more in case of the Bay of Bengal. Along with that, in case of Arabian Sea, we find the highlands of the Africa. They are responsible for making the wind movement towards the Arabian Sea. So these cold winds are responsible for maintaining the temperature lower on the surface of Arabian Sea. So we can say that the Bay of Bengal is having high temperature than the Arabian Sea. For the reason is the stratification, which is more. Higher the stratification, we find lesser mixing of water. So we find the temperature of the Bay of Bengal surface is more. So high temperature is vulnerable for creating or making an impact on more amount of cyclones there. So here we find in situ cyclones are also more in case of Bay of Bengal. So in general, we can say that the Asia Pacific region, which includes Bay of Bengal and the western part of Pacific, is vulnerable for the low pressure wind systems, which we call them as the cyclones in case of the Indian Ocean and typhoons in case of the Pacific Oceans. Now the fourth topic was the KAHALGAON and the PANDU port. So the KAHALGAON port is in Bihar and the PANDU port is in Guwahati, the Assam. Now this was in the news because of the transfer or the movement of the bagged ash from the KAHALGAON port to Pandua port through Bangladesh. And this was a demonstration of the India's inland waterways. So here when we talk about this KAHALGAON port, it is linked with the National Waterway 1 and the Pandua port is associated with the National Waterway 2. So that is, it demonstrated the significance of National Waterway and the National Waterway 2 in case of Indian parameters. And again, not to forget that in the year 2016, National Water Act was passed. National Water Act was passed. And in case of National Water Act, the government has made an attempt to create 111 national inland waterways. This includes the existing 5 national waterways also. That is National Waterway 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5. So we find these are very significant in case of the prelims. So in case of KAHALGAON and Pandu port, this is a demonstration of National Waterway 1 and National Waterway 2. And in case of places, KAHALGAON is in Bihar and Pandu is in Assam. Now the last topic is the ecological flow or e-flow of a river. Now when we talk about the river is considered as a lotic ecosystem. Lotic means the flowing water. So river is considered as a lotic ecosystem, and the point from where the river originates is called as the source of a river, and the point from where it meets either to the ocean or any river body is referred as the mouth. So the source from where it originates, mouth where it meets the ocean. So in between the source and the mouth, the river is used for different purposes. It may be for development of the resources, where the water can be used for generation of electricity. The water can be used for irrigation. The water can be used for drinking purpose. See, we find different ways in which the river water are used. So this concept is very significant in case of understanding the ecological flow of a river. Now, along with this, we have something called as river regime. Now, what is this river regime? River regime is nothing but it is a seasonal flow of a water in a river. So when we say seasonal flow of a water, it means that the volume of water which is flowing in a river is not uniform. In some regions, when there is heavy rainfall, the volume of water increases. And sometimes when there is summer is there, where the melting up of glacier is more. So in that case also, the volume of water increases in the river. So this extra water or the volume of water which is increased in a river during its flow in the course time is referred as the river regime. Now, in case of India, the Indian rivers are classified more specifically into two. One is called as the peninsular rivers, and the second categories are the Himalayan rivers. Now, in case of Himalayan rivers, we find the volume of water is maximum in two conditions. One is during the rainfall, that is monsoon. The precipitation adds up to the volume of water. And the second one is during the summer, when there is a melting up of glacier takes place. This glacier, when it melts, it also adds up the water. So we can say that the Himalayan rivers consist of two regimes. So that's the reason why Himalayan rivers are referred as the perennial rivers. It means the volume of water is comparatively more in case of Himalayan rivers in all the year. Now, in case of the peninsular rivers, these peninsular rivers, they have the maximum flow of water during the monsoon. So only during the monsoon season, July, August, September, we find the volume of water is maximum in case of the peninsular river. So that's why these peninsular rivers are referred as the monsoon regime rivers. So it means that they have only one regime. So it means during the monsoon seasons, we find the volume of water is maximum in case of the peninsular rivers. So by this we can understand that the volume of river which is flowing in case of the Himalayan rivers is different from the peninsular rivers. Along with this, again, due to impact of global warming and the climate change and the fluctuations of the monsoons are also responsible for making the variations in case of the flow of water. And when we say the flow of water is used for different activities, maybe for electricity generation, maybe for water drinking purposes, or maybe for irrigation purposes. So this availability of water is very significant to gauge what quality of water can be used or what quality of water can be diverted in different parts. Now, along with these resource development, this river is also referred as a lotic ecosystem. It means that much of the flora and fauna, living things, depend on the river for sustaining of their life. So it is a rule that we should always protect the flora and fauna which depends on the river or which depends on the rivers for the sustaining their lives. So this E-concept or ecological concept is very significant in this regards, which says that a quality, quantity and timing up of water flow required to sustain freshwater and estuarine ecosystem and the human livelihood and the well-being that depends on this ecosystem. And the ecosystem referred here is the river, which is the lotic ecosystem, the flowing ecosystem. So this ecological flow is something very significant to maintain the flow or the fresh water and to maintain the healthy system of the river. Now, in case of India, when we talk about the other parameters like construction of the dams, the using water for drinking water, in case of India, the river is also very significant in case of religious parameters. So culturally, the river is also very significant in case of India, as we find much of the areas or cities which are on the banks of the rivers are very significant in the cultural parameters, where the river water is used for the rituals. So it means that river performs the cultural activities in case of Indian Dharma. So here, when we talk about the usage of water in case of India, we have to take into consideration of the river water which is used for hydroelectricity, drinking water, irrigation. Along with that, the religious purpose is also taken into consideration to provide the healthy state of flow in case of the rivers. Now, this ecological flow is also taken a very significant aspect in defining the judgments also. When we talk about the interstate water dispute tribunals, they always consider that this ecological flow has to be maintained in case of the rivers. It may be the Kaveri verdict, it may be the verdict given in case of the Madai. So they always made an impact on defining the ecological flow so that it can sustain the ecosystem and the dependent flora and fauna with reference to the river ecosystem. Now, in case of India, the process was not that significant before 1980s or 90s. A casually view was given regarding the flow or environmental flow. It was just mentioned as minimum water required for sustaining ecology, that's it. But strong steps were taken in the year 1999 and in the year 2003, where Supreme Court provided the guidelines for maintaining the environmental flows. Then apart from that, the National Water Policy of 2002 also emphasized on what we call it as an E-flow, maintaining a minimum amount of water. Then again, the National Water Policy of 2012 also highlighted the concept of E-flow so that they should maintain the health of a river, by which it can sustain the biodiversity which depends on the river for its sustenance. And very significant move was taken in the year 2017, where a case which is referred as Pushp Saini versus Ministry of Environment and Forest. Here, National Green Tribunal, NGT, provided its verdict. It said that every river in India or any river in India should maintain at least 15 to 20% of average lean season flow of that water. So it has maintained the target, that is 15 to 20% of the average lean seasonal flow of water should be maintained in that region or in that river, so that it can maintain the richness of the biodiversity which can sustain the life of the belongings in that areas. Then again, the significant step was taken in the year 2018, that is the first week of October, where the union government made first time mandatory, or it has made a mandate regarding the minimum water to be maintained in river Ganga. So according to that National Mission for Clean Ganga, it laid down the principles, it laid down the views, it laid down the parameters on which the stretches of the Ganga has to maintain the minimum amount of water. It says that 20% of monthly average flow of preceding 10 days between November and March has to be maintained in the upper stretch of the Ganga. Then again, it says that 25% of average during the lean season of October, April and May has to be maintained in the upper stretch. So this upper stretch is nothing but it is from the glacier, that is where the river originates, up to the Haridwar. Then again, it says 30% of the monthly during June to September, that is where we talk about the southwest monsoon. So this is a very significant move with reference to maintaining the environmental flow, ecological flow or E-flow in case of the Indian rivers. Now in case of Indian rivers, as we find the two river systems are different in carrying the volume of waters. The peninsular rivers are having only one regime. It means that they are having the high volume only during the monsoon season. And again, in case of northern, that is Himalayan rivers, we find it is having the two regimes. One is the monsoon regime, second one is the melting up of the glaciers. So it becomes very difficult to provide the data. So that's why much efforts were not being done systematically in case of providing the ecological impact or an ecological flow of a river. Now, with increasing global warming and climate change, we find much of the river's water is used for irrigation, drinking water. So many rivers are becoming dry in case of peninsula, and the volume of water is also decreased in case of some rivers due to anthropogenic usages. So in this case, it has become very, very significant to maintain the E-flow or the minimum water which is required to sustain the healthy life of a river, and by which it can sustain the biodiversity, the flora and fauna which depends on the river for their sustenance. So by this, I conclude the geography this week. Thank you.